Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a financial mediator and a business valuation expert in St. Louis. And today I have the pleasure of talking to Akasha and Emily Bouchard, and we're going to talk about leadership, self-awareness, and authenticity. A little bit different topic than what we normally talk about. So we're not going to get into the guts of math and formulas and things like that. But right now, I think what's happening in the world is that we have leadership is changing, corporate America is changing, and a lot of us are starting to realize that maybe we have been this work version of ourselves and this home version of ourselves. And how do we start to be more authentic? How do we start to lead from a different space? And I think that Emily, maybe you can give everyone kind of a background of how we know each other, how we've been introduced to each other, and maybe what we're going to talk about today. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And Melissa and I know each other through the book project that Rochelle Khanna put together on Echo to Athena. And it's all about supporting women's leadership within the family office space. It's very specific. And when I noticed that all of the authors in this book, and it's a wonderful collective of amazing, powerful women, I realized we need a man in this conversation. And Rochelle had asked me to do the chapter on well-being and work-life balance. And it goes exactly to what you just said. And I asked if I could take a very unique tack with that instead of the typical, who's doing what at home, to let's look at how we can be integrated as human beings and stop this polarization between the masculine and feminine. And when we come from that truly authentic human place, then we have that awareness of our true nature and power that we can bring and have an authentic leadership perspective. And I asked if I could invite Akasha to join me because I thought it'd be extremely important to have a chapter of that nature written by a man and a woman who both come at leadership from a very holistic perspective in terms of being an integrated whole human being that has that self-awareness. And I thought it would be one, and she was all for it. So Akasha is the only man that's an author in the book. And I love that we both get to be here to talk about this topic because it's so important for where we're heading as a species, the human race, right? Like, are we going to continue with this polarization? Or are we going to have an integrated internal experience of our masculine and feminine that can then be expressed externally instead of this animosity and toxicity that's happening?
Absolutely. I think the balance of gender roles is going to be part of this conversation as well. And Akasha, tell us, you go and speak to organizations, you go and present, on leadership and maybe tell us a little bit more about how you are helping leaders to understand some of these concepts and where does this conversation go in talking about self-awareness and really looking within of maybe what you've done thus far has made you successful. But as we enter into AI, we enter into this different world of people working from home, people working from any country. How do leaders still maintain some authority, or is that way of the past, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fascinating. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks for having us. And Emily, gosh, as I was listening to you, I'm like, oh, this is such a unique place to be where I feel like I can finally, for myself, say, I'm like the beneficiary of black male privilege here. Because you have used your power to say, hey, come and co-author this book with me. So I feel like I'm on the receiving end of your power, your grace, your invitation. So I feel quite privileged in this sense. So thanks for that. A lot of the work I engage in, as you mentioned, Melissa, is really working with leaders in many major organizations around the world, lots of them in the US, And they will call the firm that I'm associated with, Cultivating Leadership, and say, listen, our leaders, what we're seeing is that the world is increasingly complex. And there's a bit of a mismatch between how our leaders are showing up, which are mostly men, as you know, couldn't be strange to most of us. Most senior leaders in many corporations are men, are males. And where there is a gap between uh, what the world is demanding, because we know the world has changed and is continuing to change. It's not just AI, everything has changed about who we are as human beings, what's required of us to engage together, to navigate the world together. And the way that we are operating, the way that we're leading is no longer fit for the world that we're in. And so, as a leadership coach, as a leadership facilitator, development facilitator, we come in and we try to close that gap between the internal capacity, inner development, inner growth, with what's going on out in the world, including how do we lead people well? You know, how do we influence each other? Which usually comes down to self-awareness, leaders having the capacity to be introspective, to look at themselves, see themselves, communicate well. Actually, is to be what makes us uniquely human, that I don't imagine AI will replace anytime soon, at least, which is how do we actually care for each other, connect with each other, love each other, show compassion to each other. How do we actually see each other as human beings, you know? And so it really comes down to that. When I talk with a lot of these leaders who are often males, the thing that challenges them the most is, how do I motivate my team? How do I engage my people to actually be with the changes that are going on in the world and in our organization? These are the things that really grips them. These are the things that really, you know, have them in a sort of vice grip. And so it essentially comes down to, how do I engage with human beings? It's not usually about how do I write better codes for AI, or how do I develop more structures, and how do I develop more systems and policies. It comes down to being humans with other humans. And it's not a thing that we are well trained in, especially as men.
No, and I mean, as a woman that's been in a man's world, corporate world, you know, there were things that I've had to do throughout my 20-year career that were not authentically me, right? You know, like I mean, if anything, I probably am a little bit more harsher than I initially appear. And I think it's interesting that we talk a lot about, even in this podcast, as the world's changing, why do they still need you in the room? You know, like
Yeah.
if we have skills, if we have capabilities, then we're still going to be needed in the room. We shouldn't be threatened by all of these outside things. But then it's like, how do you authentically show up as who you are, as opposed to who you think, you know, like, well, I need to show up and be polite, or I need to show up and be aggressive, or I need to, you know, like, instead of, and those are traditional gender roles, but now we're moving into, you know, like, are you woke? Are you aware of what, like, are you caring about the earth? Are you caring about other people? Are you caring about your organization? You know, like, those are different shifts where it's not like, oh, we can have a happy hour and get everybody motivated. No, a lot of people don't want to drink anymore. So, like, that's not going to work. Like, okay, maybe we should have a health hour, right? Where we do yoga or something like that. You know, so I don't know, Emily, give us some ideas of how things are shifting, even, you know, from energetically, from, you know, we talked about quantum physics. Like, these might be things that people aren't doing research on, yet women are going to retreats. We're doing a lot of this inner work. And there's a dichotomy in the world of, like, are men also doing this work? And if they're the leaders, are they just becoming more disconnected because we're just like, oh, well, they don't know. We'll talk about this. And, you know, they're kind of grandpa up there or something like that. But, like, how is this changing and integrating, and holistically, how could we do better?
Oh my gosh, such a great question. And I want to dovetail off of what you were saying earlier in terms of the work that I do with family businesses, family offices, family enterprises, family foundations, when somebody from one generation comes forward with all those things you listed, right? Wait, we have to be thinking about, let's wake up and let's about the environment. And they can experience a lot of pushback from older generations. And so part of this leadership development and having an authentic voice and having that self-awareness is also having the awareness of who you're speaking to and what their sensibilities are, so that you can blend with each other and then look together at what you care about. So there's a lot in terms of, in the world that I'm in and the families I work with, and the speaking is about values and purpose related to the orientation towards success and money and power. And when you are only focused on, well, what are the quarterly reports, and are we meeting our quarterly goals, and you're so short term and small focus, you're missing that bigger picture that you're saying that more people are coming forward and saying, wait, we need to be thinking about what are the long range impacts of what we're doing.
Well, and you're exactly right, because it's not just corporate America, it's family businesses, it's legacies. And if this was the legacy that we were creating, and now you have kind of this next generation saying, maybe profitability maybe we should be giving some of it, like maybe we should be shifting how, like all of that creates some conflict amongst leaders, amongst the next in line to come into leadership. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to be talking today, is how do you start to treat people as people and get to know them or understand them, as opposed to gender roles and all of that, right?
Yeah. How can there be a listening for all the different perspectives? I really love the term of granting legitimacy to each person's perspective, as opposed to shutting it down, dismissing it, deciding what's valuable or not. And then really having that curiosity. And I love what Akasha said about the depth of care that we have about the people that we are relating with. And when you're family, it's not just much more important to make sure that that care is coming forward, but the depth of care that they have for their employees comes through.
Yes.
And
Yes.
really allowing for that to be part of the culture and the conversation, and allowing for those conversations and a flow of ideas to come forward, so innovation can come forward with what you're saying too, Melissa, with where the world's going, while honoring the legacy and everything that's gotten us to this point, right? So there's that meeting of the two, and it can be a crisis point, or it can be a conflictual point, or it can be a collaborative point in terms of how you approach it. And it does come from this mindful place. And I love that you brought in quantum physics that we were talking about before we got on, in terms of thinking about it as an energetic exchange when we're relating with each other. And that when you realize that everything is vibrating and everything is made of energy, it's a whole different way of relating and understanding who we are in the world and the impact we have on each other. And Akasha, what would you want to jump in with that?
So much more, because to your point, our culture sometimes, organizational culture, social culture, tend to, whether intentionally or not, limit the fullness of the energetic beings that we are. Like, we have to play this role, we have to do this thing. And so sometimes unbeknownst to us, we cut off certain parts of our wholeness. Not that we are not whole, not that we are limited, but we have learned to function in certain gendered roles, in certain titled roles, and so on. I was also thinking when you were speaking, Emily, I just returned from a leadership development experience with the directors at a major tech company in the US, and one of the things we did, cultivating leadership, we brought them to a pottery place to throw a pot, and I'm like, this is my first time. It's something that has appealed to me, but to watch these leaders, males and females, like sit and try to figure this thing out and go through different stages of frustration, and there were some differences in terms of gender for sure. Like, I talked with some of the female leaders. There were maybe 2 or 3 of them in the room, and mostly men. And the women were just sitting, just trying to figure things out. I could guess that some of them had at least one experience doing this before, so they were a bit peaceful, and the men were just really very focused, very intent. They're trying to make this thing super perfect. But at the end of it, though, I remember heading back to the main location, and the boss was these folks. There's this one particular director, this man, and I was checking him on how the experience was, and it was like very tricky, very challenging, but he managed. But then we got to talk about his daughter, who knits, and this is a big man, he's originally from Turkey, and the way that he talks about his daughter and his wife, it was so so tender, so caring, so present, so nothing to fix, like making a pottery. It's like he's just in it, and it really lit me up listening to this leader being a father, this creator being a nurturer, like blending, in my experience, experiencing the integration of who this human, this energetic being is. It was really beautiful, and I know all of us have this in us. All of us,
Well,
male leaders, female leaders, have this sort of integrated opportunity and expression in us.
it's interesting because I feel like in traditional business, we all became a little bit robotic, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
fine, like, oh, your family member died this weekend. I'm fine. Like, I showed up for work. I'm fine. You're having a mental health breakdown because you're getting divorced. I'm fine. I'm
And we
here
say
for
that with
work.
pride, Melissa. We say that with pride, like, because it's honored to be okay when we're struggling.
Yeah. And we're not, like, as if people realize, the more authentic, and we can see it when we have clients, right? We can see it when we purchase from somebody. Like, the more authentic they are, we're like, oh, I love them. I connect with them. Like, I want to buy more from them. And yet in our organizations, we still maintain that role of, like, I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to be, I don't want to cry. Like, most people don't want to do mediation or divorce because they're like, people cry. And I'm like, people cry every day. Like, this is an okay thing, but
It's okay
it's
for students.
It's actually, there's been scientific evidence about the healing qualities of tears, right? Like, when you want to talk about science, I love bringing science into the conversation, because it's like, we have been so trained to suppress and repress and avoid different things because it's perceived like vulnerability is going to be weak, and I love the idea of shifting it, like the courageous heart. And when you look at courage, that word, that word means wisdom of the heart. And you can really appeal to people's courage, and the courage that comes from being vulnerable. And when I'm doing like multi-generational family meetings with families that are looking at, are they going to sell the business? Are they not? Are they going to do a succession plan to keep it in the family? Whatever it might be, I'll tell them, look, the words fine and good and okay are not allowed. And we are going to do check-ins and find out what everybody's mood is. And we're going to expand emotional vocabulary. And then I just facilitated a conflict with a mother and daughter where it was so easy, and it's so easy in our culture. And I want to be sure to say this, because it's not just men and women, right? It's our masculine and feminine. And they both have very strong masculine tendencies in terms of, like what you were saying, Lisa, like, go-getters, like all the different qualities that we associate with male energy. And they get very frustrated and very angry with each other very quickly. And in the facilitation, I was able to really have them slow down, using the breath, using a chance to just get out of their heads and into their hearts, and get to the hurt and the pain and the discomfort underneath that anger and frustration, so that could get healed and they can move beyond it. But otherwise, they were just going to keep hitting up against that over and over again. But when you think about, like, in a business setting, wait, we're all going to get in our hearts for a second. Well, you don't have to scare people with it, but it is more of a, hey, when we're having this conversation, we can talk about solutions and tactics and everything, but we need to really stop and get to our guts and our heart in terms of, what are we looking at here? What is the purpose of this conversation? What's the purpose of this business that we're talking about selling? What does this mean to us to not have it anymore? There's going to be emotion related to that. So we want to own that and get clear on that before we make any decisions about it.
Well, and some of it is limiting beliefs. Some of it is blocks, energetic blocks that have you need to show up in this certain way because that's the expectation. And I think Akasha, in your work with men, like how are, like I'm constantly working on myself. Like it's almost like part of my day is self-care, is, introspection, is, go through some of these things. But for a lot of people, it's uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable to kind of expose, like, like, yeah, I did some, maybe I hurt you in the past. Maybe I never apologized for it. Maybe I never did these things. But how are you seeing men start to integrate some of this, specifically powerful men, and be okay with it? Because as a woman, I would prefer to see that than this cold-hearted type of person. Like that's not engaging for me. That's not somebody that I would want to do leadership things with, right? Have you seen men move into this space, and how does that look traditionally?
Yeah, I have in a number of different contexts, but let me say some things about like in sort of traditional leadership development work where and experiences where they're going to be mostly men in leadership positions. And one of the invitations we offer to them, is actually to pause and to look at themselves, to pause, to be with themselves. And to Emily's point, this takes a lot of courage because we are conditioned to look at the system out there and not the system in here. To pause, to look at the complexity in here when everything, even our payment system is about how well are you doing. We're rewarded based on how well we do with the complexity out there. But we often require developing, expanding the internal capacity to be able to do that. One of the things that costs leaders in general, and I see it a lot with male leaders, when they're exhausted, they're really tired. There's this former Harvard professor, well-respected professor named Robert Keegan. He's done a lot of adult development work, and he wrote in a book, I think it's in his book, Immunity to Change, about how many of us, especially leaders, we are doing a second job that we're not being paid for. And the way he describes this job is similar to what you, Melissa, and Emily have been talking about. The second job that we're doing so much work at is maintaining certain identities, committing a lot of energy to protecting certain parts of ourselves from being exposed or revealed, and also projecting certain parts of ourselves that we think is acceptable. So the energy cost of being inauthentic is very high, and it leads to breakdown, burnout, so many things. And this is years of research that's demonstrated this. So the energy that we put towards being authentic is so much less than the energy we commit to projecting certain ideas, certain identities, certain beliefs that are not ours. And it costs us as leaders. It costs us as men. It's like this leader I mentioned to you. Like I could feel on the bus drive, I could feel just an ease as he's talking about his daughter, his 10-year-old daughter, as she is knitting and she's learning to sell her own crafts that she has made. It's like, who's this guy? It's like, it's so different, so easeful, nothing to project, nothing to protect, and managing his energy well. So when we are able to support leaders with committing less energy to pretending to be something that they're not, that the organization might be demanding, when we can support them with that, but first of all, self-awareness practice to see who it is that they really are and what matters to them the most. I've seen leaders when they connect with what matters most to them, be it their spirituality, be it their children, be it their partners, be it just care for the earth, like they lead better. They show up as just more connected human beings, a human being that they can be proud of. Even if the organization or the society is like, no, 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 no. We don't. So there's also a cost, there could be a cost, not always a cost, but some of it is perceived that we cannot show up and lead whole and lead authentically. Like there
And I
is an
think,
idea that we can't.
and I think we see it in family businesses as well, where, that was my child, and now they're becoming a leader and we're still taking on these roles, and part of it is that I think, people talk about the imposter syndrome. I don't think that that's always the case. I think that people fear to be really seen. Like
Yes.
if I show up and I am who I really am, are they going to like me? Are they going to want to be around me? And that
Yes.
that fear of really truly being seen also in the family dynamic is that everybody has like, this is the role that you played in the family. You were the funny person, you were the whatever. And so it authenticity surrounds that. I don't know where are we going with that, Emily? You're
I've got so many things, because it's, you're touching on something really important, and it often gets missed, right? Because there's such a focus on the business, and there's such a focus on the money side, and making sure that everything's right. And of course, the business needs to be running well. And I worked with a stepdad one time. I just loved him. He was a really successful businessman on his own right. They had blended family. He had kids and they were running part of his business. His wife had kids. They were part of her family's business. They had some things together. We were doing a family meeting together, and he said, business is really easy. Numbers are easy. You get to reconcile your reports. This family stuff, everybody calls it the soft side, but this is the hard stuff. Like, to get this right, and it makes such a difference. It's so important, right? And especially those complexities that Akasha was talking about. And when you allow for this chance to be authentically present and show up as who you fully are, it takes that courage to do it, but then it also takes the courage to speak into what might be keeping people from seeing it, right? So I'm always about speaking into the context of the conversation as well as the content, right? So let's say one of the G3, like the grandchild in a family, wants to bring up, like, can we talk about climate and do something about the earth and the environment? Knowing that there's going to be reactivity in terms of, that is just hogwash, it doesn't exist, and it's like, instead of reacting and getting into a fight and just like, how can you dismiss this? There's so much scientific evidence. It's more about, wait, hold on a minute. This is something that matters to me that I'd like us to take a chance to look at. And I get that maybe you don't believe that it is important, but let's talk about, how does our company support the earth and is aware of what are our practices in terms of sustainability versus not? I just like to know more about that in terms of our company, because it's something I care about. And if I put out together the research and the projections, would you be willing to fund exploration around this? And they could bring in different data that would help support it, but in a way that could actually help the company bottom line. So there has to be this kind of both and with it. But there's this need to have a respectful way of communicating with each other when you have very different perspectives and different views. Yeah. And then I also want to touch on something, Akasha, because this gentleman that you've mentioned and his huge heart, right? Like when he tapped into his love of his daughter and his wife, he also mentioned that he was a large man.
Yes.
And I think something that's really important to think about is, what is it like for him to move in the world with that huge, loving, like, dear heart, when there's presumptions about him because of his size, because of his role, because of assumptions that are made based on that, and how people may automatically feel like they need to be protected or they need to, like, show up in a certain way. And he may have had to develop some tendencies as well within the business world to show up more, forceful or assertive or aggressive in a way that would have people be more intimidated, right? And for him to be aware of how he can bring forward that, like, leading with that heart, can help to shift that so people aren't intimidated and yet really respect his power as well. So that's the part for me, is that the nuances that can happen.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up, because I mentioned his size exactly for that reason, Emily, because of the projections that others may have put on him and how he might have felt that he then need to to align with those projections and misalign with his own authentic expression and the things that matter to him. And many of us are in that struggle, like the place where, to your point, Melissa, it feels like a cost to actually show up as who we are and name the things that matter to us. Because everyone everywhere is projecting on others. We're all doing it. I say to folks, listen, the three of us here are figments of each other's imaginations. We are figments of our partner's imaginations, our children's imagination. Some of us are not really, really known for a number of reasons because we're not really seen. And for some of us, we also don't reveal who we are. So we're 8 billion plus people like projecting, having ideas about each other, but not really meeting each other yet. What a world it would be, I think, if we truly see and meet each other. I think leadership is largely about this. Like, can we truly see others for who they are? And can we also allow ourselves to be seen? Will we allow ourselves to be seen? Like, I think this is one of the biggest discoveries yet to actually happen in our human existence. Like, far greater than AI, anything that AI could develop. Like, can we truly see each other?
Yeah.
And will we practice revealing ourselves to each other? It's like, here I am. I know some of it might not be what you like or familiar with or want anything to do with, but here I am. This is me.
Well, and I think that is the thing, is that we should be more comfortable with people not being alike, right? Not being perfect, not being whatever that expectation, because a lot of what you're talking about is perspective. And my perspective of me and your perspective of me, first of
Yes.
all, I don't care what anybody's perspective of me is. I like mine. But that is, everybody's perspective of you is going to be different than the viewpoint that you have of yourself. And the more you can, and I'll kind of give you an example in marketing. If you go on any marketing platform right now, what is like, if you are perfect, you're not going, nobody's going to like it. I got to be honest with you. The moment something happens, something goes wrong, you look like garbage, like you just show up talking and being even more into yourself than like almost a caricature of yourself. Everybody loves it and they are so connected to it. And so I think that it's really probably a generational thing of letting go of the perfectionism of like, I got to show up a certain way, because
Yes.
like, I don't teach my kids that. I teach my kids to be who you are, to show up like that. And if people don't like you, who cares? They
Yes.
have grown up like that. I didn't grow up like that. Right?
Yes. This is
Undoing some of that.
It's so interesting to me what you're saying, Melissa, and lots of resonance because, like you, I see a world that's increasingly demanding authenticity and coherence, not just like be who you are if it's going to cause harm, intentional harm to others. So there's some nuances there. But I think our world is demanding like realness, truth. My partner and I were talking about this the other day because there are some, my partner is Korean American, and there's some, Black Korean American couples that we follow on Instagram. And one day we were talking about like, oh, we like these ones, but not these ones. And they were like, why do we really like these ones? And it came down to actually the ones that we like, they were just being themselves. They were just out and about in a shorts and talking nonsense, and they're just sharing their lives. They're not necessarily even about specific topics. You're just seeing the real people. And then the others that are super clean, their apartment looks like top notch and they dress well and they have their branded cups and their branded beverages, and I'm like, can we go to the next one? So I notice even for me, like, no, I want to see real people. I want to be with real people because it's also real people that I connect with, and I think other people connect with real people.
Well, but I think that typically, and this is where if we talk about, like some of this authenticity and self-awareness comes from going to retreats, comes from doing some of that inner work. If you really look at it, those other perfect couples are going to resonate with other couples that strive to have that same, situation. Like, my house is very lived in with 4 children, like, and teenagers and stinky things and dog and all of that, right? So I'm going to resonate to something different because we're always that mirror, right? And so if we want to manifest things, if we want to be certain things, the more we are inauthentic, we're going to attract those things that are related to the picture that we created, right? Whereas if I just am a self-proclaimed hot mess mom and I'm never going to bring a baked good, like I'm going to associate with other people like that. Like that's going to be the mirror that is kind of resonating. And yet I can also I also am very good friends with all of the really good moms because they got my back. Like they're going to tell me the dates of things. They're going to tell me when I need to show up and I don't really have to do much. So there's a balance and there's a yin yang to that. How does that play into what we do in business? Or how do we start to pull that in so that these teams are not everybody's perfect and the same? No, we have, in our team now, we have people that do certain things. I don't do those things, right? Like, so we can have these different personalities that come in and flow and kind of create a greater good as opposed to everybody is the same in some concept, right?
Yeah. And what I love about what you're saying is, when you brought up the yin yang, it's a whole circle, right? That it allows for these different aspects of the self to be integrated within that whole. And the more somebody takes that time to be self-aware about who they are, what their strengths are, what they have to bring, where they really will be able to shine, where they're going to get most energized by different things that they're doing, and they bring that forward, the team is that much more able to benefit from them and interrelate with them, right? And then integrate what they have to bring to the rest of the team. And then it encourages the rest of the people to also know what are the strengths they bring, what are the areas that they really get to shine, and really valuing that. And then I'm also going to tell something about Akasha. I don't think you know, Melissa, which is something that I've been using as a tool now with the within the family that I work with. Is he's written a remarkable book of poetry about love. And if this idea of bringing love into the conversation is really if just giving that book to everybody in the family and saying, look, just leaf through it, see what you think, find a poem that resonates for you. And when we all get together, we're going to share the stanza that you liked or the poem that you liked and why it meant something to you. And they get to learn so much about each other and how they orient towards how they show their care and how they experience and receive it. And I mean, I gave it to my father and his caregiver. He's 90 years old. He was so thrilled. And he got right back to me and said, oh, page such and such, this poem, it was so great. It totally spoke to me. And this caregiver texted me. She said, oh, I love this poem. And so we had this really amazing conversation, just the three of us, that we never would have had without that. And I'm seeing that with the families too, that it opens up this depth of conversation and connection. And it's an invitation to be able to start talking about that. How do we share love? How do we approach it? And then it brings forward the values. What are the values that we live in? And when you do that in a team, when you do that in a family business, it just informs everything else. And it allows that permission to be that whole person.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to do something else to get people to not be showing up like their normal role.
Break the pottery, like Akasha was saying, or the horse retreats that I do, right? Like the having everybody come and do something that they've never done before together, right? Where they all get to be beginners together. It just changes everything. And so bringing things that allow that is so important. And so if you're interested in the book, I'll just say it's called Love Everything. And sorry, Kasha, to call it out, but I think everyone should have it.
This is definitely one of those things you never have to apologize for. It was such a pleasant surprise, Emily. Thank you. And part of what I love about what you're speaking to, one of the things we when we work with leaders, there's a particular skill we sort of zoom in on around taking multiple perspectives. It's like, how do you put yourself in a place where you can and there's some empathy practice involved in this, but can you see the world through another person's eyes? And also, can you, to this example and the examples you just shared, Emily, can you all look at the same thing and make room for each person's perspective on it? This takes skill because we all have our own perspective, and our own perspective is like, it's supreme. So can you imagine the skill, the courage it takes to bracket our own perspective temporarily and make room for another person's perspective and embrace it as valid? Like this, like our world is like in dire need of this move. It's a big move. And we invite leaders into this, which supports their own self-awareness, their own space to both share what matters to them, but also see and understand what matters to someone else. And it makes a huge difference in relationships and how we collaborate, how we partner, how we parent, how we connect, how we lead. It's a big deal. I think it's one of the single most important skills and capacities for us to develop today.
Well, and I think there's a question there, because in an ideal situation, in a group or a team that works together, like we'll sometimes be like, okay, hey, why don't one person say, we want to go do what you love, right? You love yoga. We're all going to go and we're going to take a yoga class and we're going to be open to it. And we're going to be, positive about, learning about it, or meditation or any of these things. But in order to even do that, in order to even feel good enough to share what some of your passions or love is, right, is to feel safe in that environment, to feel like people are not judging you or going to be negative about it. Like, oh, we're going to go do yoga and sit on the ground. Well, I hate that. I'm not, like it takes a different, like it's almost like stages that you would have to get to. And you guys are obviously way more equipped to understand, like how do you as a leader start to get to that point where people are more safe in communicating? Because again, your life's changed. Like I loved happy hours when I was in corporate America. I don't anymore. Like I want to do like completely different things, and I want to be okay with saying, I like do you want to go for a hike? Do you want to go for a walk? Can we talk and walk? Like things like that, where how do you get people to be open and honest in that space?
Yeah, it does take some training for sure. And I really like having everybody start on an even playing field where they all get to experience something where they're beginners together. And then what does it take to create a really supportive learning community, right? That growth mindset, like you use language that's like matters within the business world if it needs to be there. But once everybody's in agreement that, wow, if we're going to be viable in the future, we need to be growing and learning, and let's do it together. And how do we support each other? And what are the things that support it? And what are the things that drag it down? And then you really build like a code of conduct in terms of how we are together when somebody brings up something new, takes a risk, is vulnerable. What does that look like? How do we support it and how do we move with each other when old habits show up in terms of sarcasm or dismissal, or, just like you have them listed. And then doing that education around how to step into something newly when you want to go to certainty, right? You want to go to, I like it, I don't like it, this is good or bad. It's like, that's where we are like 99% of the time. And what does it look like to go into discovery and curiosity? And that's where the innovation lives. That's where the potential lives. Like when you talk about quantum physics, we are in a field of infinite possibilities. And I mean that, like, not to just repeat the word, it's like there are infinite numbers of infinite possibilities, like beyond anything we could imagine. And when we go to that place, it opens up something. It creates an openness in the field. When we go to certainty and we think we know what's right versus not, it's like we are shutting down that possibility, and it becomes very limited and narrow. And then there's discomfort in stepping out of it. And so creating that safety around the context and the culture of learning, and where it can be a safe environment, can really help to make it so then you can learn together and remind each other and develop new ways of relating.
One of the things that I've practiced and see support, like establishing the safe space you just alluded to, Emily, and also the opportunity for us to connect more deeply, it's like inviting leaders to, one, sit with themselves, which can be very, very challenging for some and takes a lot of courage. And for those who that's challenging for, sometimes I have small groups of leaders, say 6 to 8 or so, even after spending one day with each other. And this is like, it's quite magical. Like the things that we can pick up energetically from each other from just spending a few hours, even a few minutes with each other. And when people realize that this actually happens, it blows their mind sometimes. It's like, it doesn't take a lot for us to pick up on what is really there, even beyond the words we're saying. So I would say to leaders, okay, here's an exercise for you. So spend a few minutes identifying the greatness you see in each of your colleagues here. So you're going to make some notes about this. So they each write some notes. So if it's the 3 of us, I'm going to write, a couple of things about the greatness I see in you, Emily, and then Melissa, I'll do the same thing, and each of you would do the same thing. And then they get to share it out loud. So 2 things happen usually. It's one of the most uncomfortable things that many of them admit that they have ever actually had to do, mostly to actually be on the receiving end of it, which shouldn't surprise either of us, because we don't acknowledge each other enough. So that's one of the most powerful things that happens and reliable things that happen when they do this exercise. And the second thing that happens without fail is like, I watch these leaders, male, female, big, small, foreigner, expat, nationals, whatever it is, grow, like sometimes physically, like their stature change. And then they become almost something different from what they had been before. When someone says, Melissa, the greatness I see in you is your capacity to just navigate and just blend in with so many different things that are happening and still be grounded in yourself. And the greatness I see in you, Emily, is like your willingness to just accept everything that comes. And you're so compassionate. And, for them to hear someone pour into them like this, it also creates a little bit of a doorway for them to then walk into, to look more at themselves. Because when we debrief an exercise like this, leaders typically say, I didn't know that people actually saw this part of me, which is so important to me, but I didn't know that other people see it. And now they have a kind of permission to be more of the thing that they already are, that we have already picked up on without them announcing it. It's fascinating and magical, this thing.
Well, and I'll add to this, because imagine doing that within a family system where somebody has never received an acknowledgement
or appreciation. This is one of the things leaders, family members say a lot. Nobody acknowledges me.
Yeah. It's so huge, and it's transformative. And I'll take it a step further, because I've worked with families where at the end of a really intensive 2 days of work together, we'll say we have one last activity. It's probably going to be the hardest one for some of you, but we're going to actually have you hug every single person in the room. And you should see their eyes. It's like some of them had never received a hug from a father before.
A family member.
And it's so life-changing for them to be given an experience of what that could actually be like, and to start to shift the whole culture in the family to open up that possibility of, oh, we can actually be that tender. We can actually be that caring openly, and it can be safe to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think I had the privilege of somebody close to me kind of telling me something about myself recently. And it was interesting because I was like, I mean, I enjoyed hearing it, but I was like, wow, I guess I had never seen myself like that. Right.
Yes.
You
Also
know,
that.
yeah. And it was that this person said that I'm not judgmental. And I'm thinking, I thought I was, you know, but I'm not. I really am at this stage in my life. Like, I do me, and however you want to do you. I might not choose to hang around that, but I don't care. Well, like, whatever feels good to you. So I think even sometimes having somebody see things in you that are absolutely true, but almost it to me meant that I had changed, I had healed,
Yeah.
I had progressed, and
It's
that somebody had witnessed it, and
amazing.
that's, you know, like even my kids, they're like, you know, like they have a perspective of me that is not necessarily who I used to be.
Yep.
Yes.
And it's fascinating to me, you know, because I've changed and I'm now am a different person, you know, like that is a very profound kind of situation as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the gifts that's inherent in our being human, Melissa and Emily, is that in order to be a self, we need each other. Like we reflect to each other who we are, how we have been, and the potential inside of each other. So I am not Akasha without you too, or any other person. I mean, what would I be if there were no other humans around? you know. So I get feedback from you. You mirror things to me, and then I can look. This is why self-awareness is so important. Because as you're looking at me and I'm looking at you, look at me, I see a little bit more of myself. To your point, man, it says like, oh, this is who I am now. Okay, I mean, I've been working on this, but I didn't know that it had already happened. And then we have a kind of pathway to become more of that thing. Because it's not like people are, we know when others are projecting things on us than when we are authentically expressing something, even if we don't know how well we are being about that expression. But when someone reflects those things to us that are true for us, we can be more of that, more for ourselves, more authentic, more true.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think part of the work that I do, because, you know, people share with me very vulnerable things that have happened in their life. And most people would be like, oh, that's so bad. And I'm just like, oh, well, change that story. Oh, you know, like, so I don't see it as being non-judgmental. I see it as being accepting. I
Yeah,
just, you know, accept people for how they show up. And again, choose to align with certain energy that is reflective of the energy that I want. But, you know, I know we've been talking for quite a long time. I know that you guys are going to come back and talk more, because realistically, for the last, you know, close to an hour, I feel like we have learned really as leaders some even simple ideas that we could employ to kind of, you know, with those around us, our family, our friends, our work, and all of that, like from two amazing facilitators. But maybe we could talk just a little bit about, you know, if this resonated with people, how they could reach out to you, how,
mm,
you know, tell us a little bit about your backstory and like what you do and how you came to be, because I think that that would really be helpful for everybody to know more about you. Who wants to go first?
Well, Kasha, why don't you start?
so I do a lot of my work with leaders through a global firm called Cultivating Leadership. It's based in New Zealand. We love people. I love people. Like there was a point in my life where I was in the closet about my love for us human beings. Like we are hard and tricky sometimes to get along with, but you are what I got and I'm what you got. So I'm just gonna love you when we figure it out along the way. One of the things that I amplify a lot in my work is listening to see each other. And my son was really a big teacher to me in this. When he was 5 years old, we were driving and he was saying something to me. My son has a disability. He has cerebral palsy, which impacts his speech and his mobility. So it's hard sometimes to understand what he's saying. and I was driving, and he was saying something to me. I couldn't hear him. Then he just shut down, because nobody really likes like when they're not being heard or understood. And he yelled at me and said, "Dad, you're not hearing because you're not listening with your eyes." So I pulled the car over, turned around, gave him my full attention, my presence, and begged him to repeat it one more time. And he did. And sure enough, I heard him. And to witness the joy, the delight, the acceptance, and through tears, he's like, "Dad, you finally heard me. You finally understood me." I'm like, there is something really quite powerful about us seeing each other, listening to see each other. This is the multiple perspective we've been on about, giving our presence, our energy to another, giving our love to another. I think this is the most important thing that we can do today. So this is what I focus on. This is my past. This is a bed that I've made, and I'm laying in it until I cannot get out of it anymore.
And Emily, maybe a little bit about you too.
Oh, yes. And thank you for sharing that, Akasha. My heart just, the moment you described that, what's possible when we stop and slow down and get present with those we love, what's possible. Yes. And I'd say that's probably my biggest driver in what I do. So I came to this work with families in a really unusual way in terms of working with physically ill children in therapeutic camping settings, and running a challenge course and really providing them with all kinds of opportunities to see what they are capable of when they have disabilities or they have physical health issues. And then I ended up seeing what that impact of having a child with that was like on a family. And I ended up getting a degree and becoming a licensed marital and family therapist. And then I shifted into a coaching practice, working with families with step family situations, blended families, and complex family dynamics. And I ended up being referred to a company that worked with families that had family businesses, looking at how they wanted to do succession planning. Did they want to keep it in the family and then do valuations based on keeping it going in the family and gifting for tax-based purposes, or were they going to sell? And what does this mean for their family identity? And what does it mean to no longer have this huge entity that was so significant for them for so long, and the legacy there? And I fell in love with these families, and to be able to support them in having these conversations and have them go well, and to be that present with each other, right? Because everyone's so focused on the numbers and maybe the resentments and sibling rivalries or all the things that get in the way, and to take that moment and pull over and stop and look at each other. It's like, it's so phenomenal what can happen, giving them a chance to see each other's greatness and share that, acknowledge each other, and then also make decisions together really well. And then there's a ripple effect because they're employees and their communities and what they can do in the world. So it's been a phenomenal thing. And this has been for over 20 years. So I really just love families and what can happen for them when they communicate effectively together and they can trust each other.
Well, this has been amazing. And again, we're all going to be involved in a book that's going to be released either by the end of the year or at the beginning of next year, called From Echo to Athena with Rochelle Khanna. She's been a guest on our podcast before. And we've talked about, generational trauma and things like that. Now, we have like a few minutes left, and I just want to maybe see if Akasha is going to give us the backstory to your name, because I know that at least one person that I know has also done the trail. Yeah. So do you want to tell us, or should we end it before that?
I see if I can do it in like 2 minutes, like a real quick version. So you're alluding to it. So I walked the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago now. And I went because there were 3 questions, Emily and Melissa, that like arrested my attention. Who are you? Who am I? What am I doing here? What's my work, my purpose? And who is God anyway? It's like they just kept coming back. And there was just this point in 2016 where I could not do anything. I had to give these questions my fullest attention. And as I was reflecting, meditating on these questions, this thought, this voice that came said, you need to go on a long walk and you will find the answers. And it was a voice that I was becoming more and more familiar with. And it was a voice that was deep inside myself. It wasn't my mind. I didn't make it up, and it wasn't anybody else's voice. So I decided to go along with this. And during the first week, it took me 5 weeks to walk this 500-mile pilgrimage. And during the first week, as I'm walking, and this might sound strange to some listeners and viewers, as I'm walking, a being appeared inside my mind. The way that I'm seeing both of you now, I could see this being communicating, not talking like this, but suggesting things, asking questions, and pointing me in directions that answered the questions that I had went on the walk for. And towards the end of this relationship, in this way, it was about 3 months of just conversations like this. I have about 3 or 4 journals of just dialogue and question and answers. But towards the end of this time, there was a realization of giving him a name, and like I named him, because the first thing he communicated to me was, I'm not any deity or anything like that. Don't worry about it. I'm you and you are me. I'm just a higher and wiser version of you. So my name back then was Pete. So I called him Higher Pete because he said it was higher. So I'm like, okay, this is easy. And HP for short. And during that relationship, I watched my hand one day when I asked, so what is your name? And what is our name? And I watched my hand wrote Akasha in Sanskrit, which is not a language that I knew or understood. And the first time I said Akasha, it felt like this giant being woke up inside of me and stretched and said, now you see me. Now you're awake. And it freaked me out. It was such a visceral somatic experience. I couldn't make it up. It was just like, it was undeniable. And it changed everything for me. It took me a very long time, going back to authenticity and self-expression. It took me a very long time to claim that name, because I'm like, everybody knows me as Pete. Like, why am I going to tell my mama who named me, my wife, my friends, I am now Akasha? I'm like, people are just gonna laugh at me or they're gonna ignore me. I'm like, I'm not gonna say anything to anybody. One day, while I'm in this debate, someone who I vaguely knew sent me an email that she had a dream the night before. She included 6 or 7 people, and she said, this dream is for one of you. I'm not so sure, but my role in these dreams is to pass them on when I get them. And I have some indication about who to pass them on to. And she said, in this dream, there was a bear running through the woods, dancing and shouting and saying, it's now okay to name yourself, to name yourself. And I cried, I wept. And then from that email, I started asking the people closest to me, first of all. I said, please, and I'll go by Akasha. Do you mind using that name instead of Pete? I was so nervous because here I was, Emily, to some of the things you spoke about earlier. Here I was now presenting my deepest truths to the people closest to me who could reject it, who could reject me and the changes that are now alive in me. They could have done this. And some actually did. Some struggled with it. And some who I don't know, for whatever reason, just embraced it right away and just started addressing me as Akasha. This was back in 2016. It was a big shift for me. A lot of us go through these shifts, and I know many people who don't talk about them because our society don't make space for these things anymore. Sometimes I share these stories with leaders, and they're like, and then they come to me in secret, and they say, so this thing happened to me. And they're sharing these profound spiritual experiences that they've never shared with anyone. Their truth. This thing, it matters to me a lot, like expressing our truth, even at the risk of it being rejected by others. But we cannot resist and deny our own truth. I don't think it is healthy, mentally, psychologically, spiritually, for us to reject our own truth. So
Yeah.
it's a story I enjoyed sharing. First time I'm sharing it this way, I think, because of the conversation we're having.
Well,
But
the audience is going to be able to see podcasts with each of you separately as well, and we may go into more of this, but I really appreciate you sharing that story. And a passion project of mine is actually called Tell Me Your Truth. So
I love it.
a lot of it resonates. I got the chills when you told the story, so I think it's just brilliant. I appreciate that. I appreciate both of you. This has been an amazing conversation, and I hope to see you again, and we'll continue the conversation. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Melissa.
you for having us.
Bye.
Nice